house has always smelled like cedar and lemon oil. On winter mornings, the light slides in along the stair treads like it's measuring each riser, and if you stand in the hall, you can feel the heat trapped in the old plaster from someone's long-ago repair. That morning, I stood barefoot on the hardwood and watched a stranger in a navy windbreaker stop at my gate with a folder tucked under his arm. The wind pushed a smell of rain and soil through the open transom. I had filed my affidavit 47 minutes earlier. The timestamp on the county recorder's website said 9:13 a.m. The closing was scheduled within 48 hours. 17 missed calls trembled on my screen from the same family thread, my father's name stacked like heavy bricks, when the stranger looked up at the porch glass and saw me watching him. He wasn't here to threaten or to charm. He was the buyer. He flipped the top sheet, read the words "Fraud Alert Affidavit," and swallowed hard enough for me to hear it on the wood. "Read it," I said, opening the door as the lemon oil smell breathed out past me. His eyes moved fast, then slower at the lines where I had stated my name, my role, and the trust holding title. He was a man caught under a sudden skylight. He read out loud once. Recorded interest? Allegations of forged authority. The word forged hung in the cedar scent like a thin wire. On the sidewalk, a police cruiser idled. I'd called for a civil standby. The bodycam's light winked red. "I'm not here to fight," I told him, my voice steady. "I'm here to document." "Red," the officer said quietly behind him. Not to me, but to the day. "Move one brick and let the wall fall." Grace had told me 2 nights earlier when the sale paperwork slipped into my inbox like a hand under a door. I didn't sleep after that. I didn't argue on the phone. I documented. I named the brick. 2.9M, my house, my name. Move one brick and let the wall fall. When I was 8, my mother taught me how to polish brass without scratching it. We lived on a budget, and she would smile with her mouth closed at the way light could make something look more valuable than it was. She'd put the key on a folded towel and say, "Small circles. You don't force the shine, you reveal it." My father would step into the doorway of her studio, and she'd drop her eyes as if to lay them down too. There's a memory that doesn't explain anything. It just foreshadows like a weather vane. I learned early that quiet doesn't mean helpless. I learned that the person who knows where the papers are is the person holding the thread. By the time I was 29, I had put away enough from engineering work and weekends photographing weddings to buy this house in Queen Anne, Seattle. I did it with a careful mix of savings, a small inheritance my mother left for tools and walls, and a mortgage I took out under my name. The house became my project and then my proof. I stripped the paint from the stair railing with a heat gun and learned where the floor dips before the kitchen threshold. My father came by once, held a coffee cup like a prop, and said it was ambitious, which is how he compliments women when he's already pricing their work for someone else. The lever they used later wasn't elegant. It didn't have to be. It was a forged durable power of attorney dated 2 summers back, about the time my father asked me if I had someone who could read all those bank papers for me. The document bore a notary stamp from a woman who had died the previous winter. The signature at the bottom looked like my name dragged through gravel. It was the kind of forgery that depends less on skill and more on momentum. He used it to open files at the title company, to talk like he had authority at a bank, and to sign a listing agreement with expedited timelines. He also, with a flourish he thought was genius, assigned my younger sister Emily to my apartment while I was away in Portland for a 3-day offsite. The text came in at 7:52 a.m. M moves in TDY. LL has keys. He hadn't paid rent in his own place for months. The apartment was mine, on paper and in practical fact. Of course, I accepted continued awkwardness where peace could be purchased cheaply. I told myself it was a miscommunication. I told myself a quick phone call could clean it up. When I turned my key in my apartment that evening, a stranger opened the door. The hallway smelled like takeout and paper napkins. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, bracing the door with a foot. Behind her, a suitcase sat on the couch. "My name is on the lease," I said. "I'm Sabrina." "Has someone assigned you here?" She held up a crisp piece of paper with my landlord's logo copied and skewed. The signature was a JPEG printed over a darker JPEG. The stranger turned it so I could see. "A Rick Holt emailed this," she said, apologetic and annoyed, her eyes scanning my face for confirmation. "That's my father," I said. "He does not have authority. I'm going to ask the building manager to meet us here." I texted the manager, then called. I kept my voice level. He came up with a binder and a copper key that matched the ones I carried. We compared signatures. The manager pursed his lips, checked the tenant portal, and called the number on the assignment. Rick's voice came tinny and theatrical, ending with, "Well, then I guess we'll see." The manager shook his head, turned to the stranger and said, "I'm sorry for this. He can't assign what he doesn't hold." It took 15 more minutes, and a calm 911 request for a civil standby to escort Emily, not the stranger, but my sister, who arrived flustered and defensive, back down the elevator. The officer's body cam caught her saying, "Dad said it was done," and my "it isn't." I didn't add anger to the scene. I added a note to my stack. The next day, a slip showed up at my bank, a withdrawal authorization with deceased in a gray banner across my online profile. I stared at it until the word stopped looking like a word. "I didn't die," I said aloud, my mouth dry. A customer service representative named Susan watched the screen with me from the other end of a phone line and said, "Yeah, that's a status we see when somebody tries to consolidate under a power of attorney and someone clicks the wrong flag. Or the right one for their plan." The banner meant I couldn't reset my online password. It meant the card in my wallet might be declined. It meant my father was building a paper wall around me, one gray box at a time. I asked for a supervisor. They told me to come in with ID and the originals. I had the originals. Another artifact showed up in my inbox at 11:17 p.m. "Just a heads up, we'll be transitioning title," from an agent at Cascadia Title. The subject line read, "Pre-transition POA doc on file." A few lines down, a copy and paste of a signature that was supposed to be mine. The email was short, efficient, unbothered. It was like an airplane pilot announcing a change in altitude and then turning off the seatbelt sign. I replied with, "Please confirm the exact document authorizing any pre-transition. Also confirm you received the attached trust certificate and prior recorded deed." I attached a PDF I'd scanned a year earlier, the Hart Studio Trust, created with my mother's legal voice still breathing in the boilerplate. I had recorded a deed into that trust months before when the house's paint dried enough to stop sticking to my palm. Grace, then a junior escrow officer who'd handled a small refinance for me, had taught me that as long as the paper beats the story to the courthouse, the paper is the story. "Move one brick and let the wall fall," she'd said in the elevator that day, her tote bag full of things other people took for granted. I called Grace when the pre-transition hit. We met at a diner on Dexter where the coffee tastes like the color of the cup. She slid into the booth with a laptop open and nodded at the manila envelope in my hand. "Talk to me," she said. I laid out the 3 artifacts: the forged POA, the bank screen with the deceased flag in an accidental screenshot I'd grabbed out of incredulity, and the assignment to my apartment. Grace's face didn't move much. Her eyes only softened at the mention of Emily standing in the hallway with a backpack like we were in middle school. "First brick is the recorder," she said at last. "Affidavit of identity, or in our county, you can call it a notice of potential fraud. You're not suing anyone. You're notifying. We'll send your packet to both sides, title and escrow. And if the buyer has a real agent, they will not touch a transfer with a cloud they can see." "I don't want to blow a buyer's life up," I said. "You didn't?" she said, stirring cream into her coffee without looking. "Your dad did. Move one brick. Let the wall fall. I slept 3 hours. I woke up to the listing for my house. Classic Queen Anne gem with city views. Expedited close. The asking price was 2.9 millimeters. My hands did what they're good at. I typed up the affidavit, swore to it in front of a notary with a jagged haircut who kept her office at a shipping store, and by 9:13 a.m., the county recorder's website stamped the PDF and put it in the long drawer of public fact. I sent the same packet to Soundview Bank's fraud email. I CC'd Cascadia Title and the buyer's agent. I asked for a civil standby because in my experience, people believe the law more when it's wearing a reflective vest. Then the calls started. 17 within the first hour. My father. My aunt, who says her name like a brand. Emily. And 3 numbers I didn't recognize. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and let the tirades leave themselves voicemails. My mother's copper mixing bowl reflected my profile like a rippled coin. I took a picture of the call log because it felt like part of the receipt. Grace texted, "Escrow says they're reviewing." Buyer's agent responded, "Concerned. Request docs. Proceeding?" At 11:02, the knock. I stepped barefoot to the porch. The buyer's folder had a red pen clipped to it. The officer stood behind him, hands casually folded. A wind moved the porch fern. The buyer cleared his throat when he got to the part in my affidavit where I wrote, in plain sentences, that the Hart Studio Trust had been recorded months ago, that any purported authority to transfer on my behalf had not been granted, and that a bank had flagged me as deceased in error, or through misrepresentation, within the last 24 hours. He turned to the officer, then to me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I put 20% down. This was supposed to close in 48 hours. I don't think I can proceed." "You shouldn't," I said. "You deserve clear title. You deserve a home that doesn't begin with a fight. The seller told us." His voice trailed off. He didn't finish. "Maybe he didn't know how?" "He told you what he needed you to believe," the officer said. "Not as gossip, but as someone who stood on enough porches to recognize the choreography." "I'm going to call my agent," the buyer said, stepping back, the paper shaking in his hand just enough to make the red pen quiver. "I'm not arguing. I'm documenting. I didn't say it with triumph. I said it like a line you put under a column." The flood afterward was predictable. My aunt's Facebook post that began, "Pray for Sabrina, who is having a mental break and trying to sabotage her father's retirement." The accidentally public message in the family group chat where my father wrote, "If she won't sign, we can do it without her." The text sent to Emily that she forwarded to me where he promised to finally make it right if she'd just get the keys. I didn't clap back. I made a thread of receipts, a single post with screenshots, time-stamped filings, the page from the county site, the bank's deceased banner photo, and I ended it with, "No discussion here. This post is for the record." Then I went quiet. My friends texted heart emojis. Strangers sent advice. I didn't take any of it. I took the last bite of a piece of toast I'd forgotten to finish, and I washed the plate. Cascadia title called. A voice with edges said, "We have to freeze disbursement pending verification. We've flagged the file." The buyer's agent emailed, "We're out." My father left a voicemail howling that I'd embarrassed him in a community that, to be honest, doesn't remember him until he's loud. The world narrowed back down to my house and the sound of rain hitting the porch with more insistence. That afternoon, a detective from SPD named Omar Ruiz knocked with a small notebook. He'd gotten a referral from the bank, he said, about potential identity misuse. He sat on the front step with me and asked for names, dates, and the copies of the copies. He looked at the deceased screenshot and shook his head with a grim smile. "People learn just enough of the right words to hurt themselves," he said. He asked if I'd consent to a recorded statement. I did. He said, "It might go nowhere. It might go somewhere. Either way, keep your lines clean. Move one brick. Let the wall fall," I said, "and let the camera see it," he answered, tapping his bodycam, which was resting but present. We set a short hearing 2 weeks out. 2 weeks sounds long until you've already lived in 48-hour increments. During those days, my father sent a 12-paragraph email with subject line, "We can fix this," which ended in a sentence that swallowed itself. I forwarded it to Grace and to Detective Ruiz. Emily texted me a string of heart emojis and then called late at night to apologize. Her voice sounded like it was coming through a paper bag. "He told me you'd be okay," she said. "I am okay," I told her. "But not because of him. Because I have the paper, Em." On the morning of the hearing, I wore a navy dress with sleeves that made me think of competence. The courtroom felt like a kiln. Dry air, old heat, everything softened enough to be reshaped. The judge, Hanner May Chen, spoke like punctuation turned into a person. In the row behind me, Grace sat with her tote and a stack of index tabs. At the other table, my father flanked by a lawyer with a floral tie and an exhaustion I recognized from a distance. Emily didn't come. Sometimes the kindest thing a person can do for herself is stay home. The judge called the matter Hart Studio Trust as to Holt property, which didn't read like my life until it did. My father's lawyer talked first, saying words like urgency and pressure of a hot market and family arrangement. Judge Chen waited him out, her eyes not moving, then turned to me. I stayed standing. I said my name. I said I had recorded the trust months earlier, and that I had sworn to the affidavit because I could not let a buyer walk into a storm someone else created and call it weather. I said the bank had briefly tagged me deceased, and that it had been corrected after I showed them my originals. I slid the copies across the rail like old mail. Grace handed me a divider with a post-it I could peel back like a calm trick. Judge Chen read for longer than anyone breathes for free. She set the papers down. She didn't look at my father when she spoke to him. Any transfer based on this document, she lifted the forged POA by a corner as if it might stain her, is hereby stayed. The court finds sufficient indicia of fraud or misuse to enjoin disbursement. She turned to me. This court recognizes the prior recorded deed into the Hart Studio Trust. Her voice didn't rise when she said recognized. It didn't have to. In the hallway afterward, my father approached with his hands out, the way he does when he wants to get through a door without touching the handle. The fluorescent light did him no favors. You didn't have to do all that, he said, his smile a zipper with a tooth missing. I didn't do all that, I said. The institutions did. I just showed them who I am. You'll regret making this public, he said. The threat wasn't a threat. It was a habit trying to wear its old coat. I'm not arguing, I said, and heard Grace beside me exhale. I'm documenting. We had one more scene in us, the kind you can plan and still feel surprise at. It took place back at the house because places are characters whether you like it or not. Detective Ruiz stood on my porch, the body cam recording a follow-up. The buyer returned to collect an inspection letter he'd forgotten. He shook my hand. I found another place, he said. But for what it's worth, I'm glad this happened this way. Not to you, but not to me either. Clear title, I said, a toast without glasses. My father arrived too, because of course he did. He brought Emily, and I watched her get out of his car like she was leaving a theater during a matinee into a bright street. He looked at the camera, at the officer, at me. He spoke, and his voice slid against the grain. I just want to apologize, he said, every syllable coded in if and but. The camera caught the whole sentence the way tide pools catch pebbles. He turned to Emily like the audience he wanted. I was under pressure. It was a good offer. 2.9 was a price, I said. It wasn't a permission. He reached into his coat for a folded sheet. It was a check, the buyer's earnest money refund made out to the right name because Cascadia had managed the freeze with competent strain. He held it like a prop, as if this could be a redemption scene if the lighting were better. The camera saw his hand tremble. He told you what he needed you to believe. I didn't take the paper. I didn't need to. The brick had already moved and the wall had already fallen. Not on me, but around the story he had built. There's a moment in every unraveling where the person who pulled the wrong thread looks down and sees only string. My father looked down. He saw the porch he didn't own, and the officer who didn't belong to him, and the buyer who wasn't grateful. He saw Emily, whose eyes had learned a new language in 2 weeks. He turned, said something about lawyers, and left. The camera watched him go because the camera was patient, and patience is a kind of power too. We formalized the boundary a week later. I signed a trespass letter with the property manager of my building for the apartment, listing names she could post if it came to that. Soundview corrected my status in their system and sent a letter addressed to Ms. Sabrina Holt, and I put it in a folder labeled Restorations. Cascadia. Title issued a notice closing the file without transfer, citing the court's order. Judge Chen's deceasance settled as if the room itself had required it. Prior recorded interest governs. No fireworks. Just an institutional voice that sounded like the opposite of panic. Emily came over with a paper bag holding something that clinked gently. She set it on my table. It was a shadow box frame and a small brass hook. For your key, she said. If you want. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We ate pears and cheese and read a magazine article out loud about a woman who mapped wildflowers off a highway. Move one brick and let the wall fall, she said, smiling at the phrase like it had belonged to us all along. Or just hold the wall, I said, when it's yours. I mounted the key from my front door in the shadow box, a small weight against dark velvet. I hung it in the hallway where the light measures the risers. I touched the glass once lightly to smudge it on purpose. I smoothed the smudge away with the corner of my sleeve, small circles, revealing the shine I already knew was there. In the end, the house still smells like cedar and lemon oil. The staircase still tracks light the way good tools track wood. I don't need revenge. I have a record. I have a front door that opens with a key that lives in a frame because it can. I have a sister who learned to check the paper before she checks her phone. And I have the memory of a buyer, a stranger in a navy windbreaker, reading a page on my porch and choosing not to walk.